I never expected that at 66 years old, I'd lose my hearing completely. But that's exactly what happened to me 4 months ago after getting a really bad infection. I'm Nina, and this whole mess started when I woke up one morning in the hospital, unable to hear a single thing. It wasn't like I had a lot of people to talk to anyway. My daughter Lucy and I hadn't spoken in years, not since her father, my husband, passed away. That whole situation still makes my blood boil when I think about it. Lucy showed up at my house just days after the funeral, demanding that I sell our family home and give her half of everything her father had left behind. I remember staring at her, shocked that she could be so cold about it. "Lucy," I told her, "your father left everything to me in his will. You'll get it all anyway when I'm gone, you're my only child. Why are you in such a hurry?" She didn't like that answer one bit. "That's not fair," she yelled. "I have my own family to think about. I can't just sit around waiting for you to die." Those were the last words we exchanged before she stormed out. After that, we lived completely separate lives, her with her husband Mike and their kids in some rental house across town, me alone in the big house where I'd lived with her father for over 40 years. Then came the infection that took my hearing. I was lying in that hospital bed, feeling more alone than ever, when Lucy suddenly showed up in my room. She had a notepad with her, and I watched as she wrote something down and held it up for me to read. "Mom, you need someone to take care of you now. Let me help, please." Maybe it was the medication, or maybe it was just being tired of being alone, but I found myself nodding. Before I knew it, I invited her and her whole family to come live with me. Lucy, Mike, their 18-year-old daughter Drew, and 14-year-old Tom, they all moved out of their rental place and into my big country house. I even gave Lucy access to my bank account so she could handle all the bills and shopping, not just for me but for all of them. I figured it would be easier that way, since I couldn't hear anything anymore and going to stores or dealing with payment stuff had become a real challenge. The first few weeks of living together were strange, but Lucy really did stick to her word about taking care of me. Every morning, she'd go grocery shopping, making sure to get everything we needed. She'd cook 3 meals a day, clean the house from top to bottom, and never complained when I needed to go to yet another doctor's appointment. Those appointments became a regular part of our routine. Lucy would drive me to the clinic, wait with me in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, and help me communicate with the doctors. We'd gotten into a system where everyone wrote things down for me on notepads or their phones, and I'd respond by talking, probably too loudly, but nobody seemed to mind. I remember one particular appointment that changed everything. The doctor had been running all sorts of tests, and I was hopeful they'd finally have some good news. Instead, he wrote on his notepad, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker, but a hearing aid won't help in your case. We need to keep investigating the root cause of your deafness before we can work on restoring your hearing." I must have stared at that note for 5 solid minutes. Lucy had to tap my shoulder to get my attention, probably worried about how still I'd become. But what could I say? It felt like someone had just slammed a door in my face. Back at home, we settled into our new way of communicating. The family would write notes to me about everything, what they wanted for dinner, when they were going out, if someone had called. I'd respond by talking, making sure to speak up so they could hear me clearly. It wasn't perfect, but we made it work. My granddaughter Drew turned out to be a real blessing during this time. She noticed how bored I was getting and showed up in my room one day with her tablet. "Grandma," she wrote, "let me show you some cool apps I think you'll like." She spent hours teaching me how to use different programs, showing me how to download books, play games, and even watch movies with subtitles. I had to quit my job at the college, which was harder than I expected. I'd been teaching literature there for years, not because I needed the money. Thomas had left me more than comfortable with his inheritance, but because I loved it. Standing in front of those students, discussing great works of literature, watching their faces light up when they finally understood a complex passage, that was what got me out of bed in the morning. But you can't teach when you can't hear your students. I tried to convince myself I could make it work somehow, but deep down, I knew it was impossible. How could I lead discussions? How could I answer questions? How could I know if a student was struggling if I couldn't hear them trying to get my attention? So now my days are different. I spend most of my time reading books, both physical ones and ebooks on the tablet Drew gave me. I've discovered that the internet is a pretty amazing place when you have nothing but time on your hands. I've found websites about everything you can imagine, and I've even joined some online book clubs where everything is written rather than spoken. Living in silence makes you notice things you might have missed before. From my usual spot in the living room armchair, I had a front row seat to my family's daily life, even if I couldn't hear it. Lucy and Mike seemed to be getting along better than ever. I'd watch them in the kitchen during breakfast, heads close together, laughing over their coffee. Lucy would touch Mike's arm while they talked, and he'd smile at her in a way that reminded me of how Thomas used to look at me. Sometimes they'd catch me watching and wave, their faces breaking into warm smiles. The grandkids had settled into their routines too. Drew spent a lot of time in her room, studying or working on her photography projects. Tom was usually glued to his gaming console in the basement, only emerging for meals or when Lucy called him upstairs. It all looked so normal, perfect, even. But then I started noticing other things. Like the time I walked into the kitchen to get some tea, and Lucy and Mike were having what looked like an intense conversation. When they saw me, they both smiled broadly, too broadly, but their eyes met over my head in a way that made me uncomfortable. Or how sometimes, when they thought I wasn't looking, they'd exchange these knowing smirks while glancing in my direction. I tried to shake it off. After all, why would they be mocking me? Lucy was taking such good care of me, cooking my favorite meals, keeping my room spotless, making sure I took all my medications on time. And Mike had been nothing but helpful, fixing things around the house and even installing some new safety features in my bathroom. But those looks, those smiles, they kept nagging at me. The way their expressions would shift when they thought I wasn't watching. The quick glances they'd exchange when I'd ask them to write something down for me. The way their smiles never quite reached their eyes when they were directed at me. Stop it, I'd scold myself. You're just bitter because you can't hear. You're imagining conspiracies because you're frustrated with your situation. They're your family, they love you. Weeks passed like this, with me constantly second-guessing everything I saw. Was that laugh really at my expense? Did that whispered conversation stop because I entered the room? Was I really seeing mockery in their expressions, or was it all in my head? Then came that morning, it must have been around 6 a.m. I was sleeping soundly when something jolted me awake. At first, I was confused, disoriented. Then I realized what had woken me, a car horn blaring loudly from the street outside. I jumped out of bed, already pulling on my robe, ready to go give that inconsiderate driver a piece of my mind. I was halfway to my bedroom door when it hit me, I had heard the horn. I had actually heard it. My hand started shaking as I stood there in the middle of my room. I could hear the early morning birds chirping outside my window. I could hear the hum of the heating system. I could hear the old floorboards creaking under my feet. My hearing was back. After 4 months of nothing but silence, I could hear again. My heart was still racing with excitement as I headed toward the stairs. I couldn't wait to tell everyone about my miracle, that my hearing had returned. But halfway down the staircase, I heard voices coming from the living room. Lucy and Mike were already up, talking in low tones. "I'm so damn tired of this," Mike was saying, his voice dripping with irritation. "How much longer do we have to keep pretending? Pretending to care about your mother. Acting like we're one big happy family. I'm sick of tiptoeing around that old woman. When is she finally going to die?" I froze on the stairs, my hand gripping the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. But what came next was even worse. "Just be patient," Lucy replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "It won't be much longer. I mean, look at her, she's already lost her hearing. That's usually the first sign of overall decline in old people. Once they start losing their faculties, they usually give up pretty quickly. She'll probably just waste away." The world tilted sideways for a moment. I had to sit down on the stairs, my legs too weak to hold me up. My own daughter. My own flesh and blood was sitting down there, calmly discussing my death with her husband. All those suspicious looks I'd noticed. I hadn't been paranoid after all. It took everything I had not to break down right there. I stood up, straightened my robe, and walked down the rest of the stairs. Entering the living room, I made sure to walk heavily. After all, a deaf person wouldn't know to step quietly. I smiled broadly at them and practically shouted, just as I had been doing for the past 4 months, "Good morning, it's such a beautiful day." They jumped a little at my entrance, but quickly recovered. Lucy gave me that sweet, fake smile I now recognized all too well, while Mike nodded enthusiastically. God, how had I not seen through this performance before? That afternoon, I dug out my old phone from the drawer and figured out how to use it as a voice recorder. I wasn't sure what I would do with the recordings yet, but I knew I needed evidence. Every morning after that, I'd slip the phone into the pocket of my house dress and let it record everything. The things I heard over the next few days made me sick to my stomach. It wasn't just Lucy and Mike, even my grandson Tom was in on it. He'd come home from school, look right at me sitting in my chair, and ask loudly, "Hey, is the deaf old lady still alive?" Lucy and Mike would laugh like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. "Yes, son," Mike would say, chuckling. "Unfortunately, she's still kicking." "God, she's so annoying," Tom would complain, rolling his eyes. "Everything has to be written down or gestured. It's infuriating. Can't she just figure things out on her own?" And through it all, they'd smile at me. Sweet, caring smiles. Patient smiles. Loving smiles. They'd write me little notes asking if I needed anything, if I was comfortable, if I wanted a cup of tea. And all the while, they were waiting for me to die. Thank God for Drew. In the middle of all this ugliness, my granddaughter was the only pure thing left in my life. While everyone else in the house was putting on an act, Drew's kindness was real. I could hear it now in her voice, see it in her actions, and feel it in her genuine concern for me. Every few days, she'd knock on my door with a new book tucked under her arm. "Grandma," she'd write in her notebook, "I saw this at the bookstore and thought of you. It's about a woman traveling through Europe in the 1920s. I know you love historical stories." She was right, I did love them. And I loved how she actually paid attention to what I enjoyed, unlike her mother who just pretended to care. Drew would sit with me for hours, showing me her photography projects on her laptop. She had real talent, capturing moments that told entire stories in a single frame. I could hear her voice now when she shared these things with me, full of passion and enthusiasm, but I kept up my act of reading her notes and responding in my too loud voice. It broke my heart a little to pretend with her, the only honest person in this house, but I couldn't risk the others finding out. But what truly touched my heart was how she stood up for me when she thought I couldn't hear. One evening, I was in my room when voices rose from the hallway outside my door. "Mom, you need to stop talking about Grandma like that," Drew was saying, her voice firm. "She deserves better. She's not just some burden we're waiting to get rid of." "Oh, honey, mind your own business," Lucy dismissed her. "Go to your room and stop interfering in things that don't concern you." I heard Drew storm off, her footsteps heavy with teenage indignation. Through my window, I could see her walk to the garden bench where she always went when she was upset. She sat there, wiping tears from her eyes, and I wished I could tell her how proud I was of her, how grateful I was for her defense of me. It was strange how Drew had turned out so different from her mother. Where Lucy was calculating and cold, Drew was warm and genuine. Where Lucy saw me as a burden to be endured, Drew saw me as a person to be cherished. Sometimes I caught myself studying her face, trying to find traces of the kind young woman Lucy had once been, before money and greed had poisoned her heart. Having Drew in my corner made the whole situation a little more bearable. Yes, I was living in a house full of people who were waiting for me to die, but at least I had one ally. One person who saw me as more than just an inconvenience or a source of inheritance. One person who actually cared. It's amazing how people will say anything in front of someone they think can't hear them. I was sitting in my usual spot in the living room, pretending to be absorbed in my book, when Lucy and Mike started talking about money. My money, to be specific. "So how much have you managed to get out so far?" Mike asked casually, as if they were discussing the weather. He was sprawled on the couch, feet up on my coffee table. Lucy was flipping through some papers, probably my bank statements. "About 25,000 so far." I nearly dropped my book, but caught myself just in time. $25,000? They'd stolen $25,000 from me? Mike scoffed. "That's it? Come on, Lucy, you need to be more aggressive about this. That old bag has more money than she knows what to do with. She wouldn't even notice if you took twice that amount." I kept my eyes fixed on my book, turning a page slowly, playing my part. Inside, my heart was pounding so hard I was afraid they might hear it. "It's not that simple," Lucy said, sounding annoyed. "Mom has alerts set up on her account for large withdrawals and transfers. If we go over certain amounts, she'll get notifications. She may be deaf, but unfortunately, she's not blind. We have to be careful." "Yeah," Mike sighed heavily. "It's really a shame she's not blind too. That would make things so much easier." I had to fight to keep my hands from shaking. My own daughter and her husband, sitting there discussing how convenient it would be if I was not just deaf, but blind as well. I wondered if there was any limit to their cruelty. Later that same day, I was pretending to nap in my chair near the kitchen when I heard them at it again. The recorder in my pocket was catching every word. "I noticed you'd been buying those fancy organic steaks," Mike was saying. "And that expensive wine. Isn't it too posh for your mother?" Lucy laughed, that fake, tinkling laugh she'd perfected over the years. "Oh please, I buy all the good stuff for us and get her the cheapest things I can find. Generic brands, marked down meat, whatever's on clearance. She can't taste the difference anyway, she's so grateful just to have someone cooking for her." They both turned to look at me then, and I could feel their eyes on me as I pretended to sleep. They started laughing, not even trying to be quiet about it. After all, why bother being quiet around a deaf woman? "Look at her," Lucy snickered. "Sleeping like a baby, no idea we're eating filet mignon while she gets discount hamburger." "At least she's getting something to eat," Mike chuckled. "Better than what she deserves." I kept my breathing steady, my face relaxed, while my stomach churned with disgust. The worst part wasn't even the money. It wasn't the cheap food or the theft or the deception. It was hearing the absolute glee in their voices as they discussed taking advantage of me. They weren't just stealing from me out of desperation or need, they were enjoying it. They were having fun making a fool out of the deaf old lady who had welcomed them into her home. 3 weeks before my birthday, Lucy handed me a note during breakfast. Her handwriting was extra neat, like she'd taken special care with it. "Mom, I want to throw you a big birthday party. We'll invite all your friends and relatives. You deserve to be celebrated." I smiled and nodded enthusiastically, shouting my reply as usual, "That sounds wonderful, dear. How thoughtful of you." But I knew better now. This wasn't about celebrating me, this was about putting on a show. Lucy wanted witnesses to her devoted daughter act. Maybe she was trying to establish herself as the caring daughter in front of everyone, or maybe she wanted to demonstrate what a burden I was and how nobly she was handling it. The preparations went into full swing. Lucy made dozens of phone calls, which I could now hear perfectly, inviting people and arranging everything. She ordered expensive catering, hired decorators, and even got a professional photographer. Nothing but the best for her dear old mom's birthday. The day of the party arrived, and our house filled with relatives and old friends I hadn't seen in years. Some of them looked uncomfortable writing notes to communicate with me, but they made the effort. All the while, Lucy fluttered around like the perfect hostess, the devoted daughter. "Mom has been such an inspiration," she told everyone, her voice thick with fake emotion. "Taking care of her isn't a burden at all, it's a privilege. After all she's done for me, this is the least I can do." I sat there in my place of honor, smiling and nodding, playing my role as the grateful deaf mother. Inside, I was counting down the minutes until I could end this charade. Then Tom, my grandson, dimmed the lights and started a slideshow he'd prepared. Photos of our happy family filled the wall, Lucy helping me in the garden, Mike reading to me, something he'd never actually done, Tom and Drew sitting with me on the porch. Each photo was perfectly staged, and each one had sappy captions like "Love knows no bounds" and "Family is forever" superimposed over them. I could hear the ahs and sniffles from the guests as they watched. My cousin Patricia wiped away tears, saying how wonderful it was to see a family so devoted to each other. My old college friend Martha kept patting Lucy's hand, telling her what an amazing daughter she was. The slideshow ended with a photo of all of us together, looking like the perfect loving family, with the words "We love you, Grandma," sparkling across the screen. That was when I decided I'd had enough. I stood up slowly, my recorder still safely tucked in my pocket, containing weeks of evidence of their true nature. The room quieted as everyone turned to look at me, probably expecting some kind of emotional thank you speech. "I have something important to tell all of you," I said, my voice clear and steady. "No more shouting, no more exaggerated gestures." I'd been able to hear for the past 6 weeks. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy's face turned the color of sour milk. Mike looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Tom froze with his hand still on the laptop, his mouth hanging open. Before anyone could recover from my announcement, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "And I have proof of everything," I said, pressing play. The room filled with Lucy's voice. "It won't be much longer. That old woman will give up soon enough." "Then Mike, how much have you taken so far?" 25,000? "That's nothing, take more." Tom's cruel joke echoed through the speakers. "Hey, is the deaf old lady still alive?" The recordings went on and on. Every nasty comment, every cruel joke, every conversation about stealing my money, all of it played out in front of our stunned audience. Some of my friends covered their mouths in horror. Others just stared at Lucy and her family with disgust. I turned to my cousin Robert, who'd been a lawyer for 30 years. "Robert, I'd like to retain your services. I want to press charges against my daughter and her husband for elder abuse and financial fraud." Robert stood up immediately, his face hard with anger. "It would be my pleasure, Nina. And I'll do it pro bono. What they've done is despicable." Lucy jumped up, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, please. You're taking everything out of context. We were just joking around. We didn't mean." "Get out." My voice was quiet but firm. "Get out of my house right now. All of you. Take your things and leave." They left that night, Lucy still crying, Mike silent and seething, Tom skulking behind them like the coward he was. Only Drew stayed behind, holding my hand through it all. A week later, Lucy transferred back every penny she'd stolen, all $25,000. I suspect Robert's threats of legal action had something to do with it. I decided not to sue after all. Not because I forgave them, but because I wanted them out of my life completely. A lawsuit would have meant months or years of dealing with them through the courts. Instead, I went to my lawyer and had my will changed. I made it official that Lucy was completely cut out. She wouldn't get a single penny after my death. I made sure all our relatives and friends knew about it too. No one blamed me, they'd all heard the recordings. As for Tom, I couldn't bring myself to forgive him either. Some people told me I should cut him some slack, because he was only 14, but I disagreed. 14 is old enough to know right from wrong. 14 is old enough to understand that wishing death on your grandmother isn't a joke. Some of the things he said about me were worse than what came out of the adults' mouths. But Drew, my sweet Drew, turned out to be my saving grace. When she got accepted to Berkeley, I paid her tuition in full. She moved into the dorms, far away from her toxic parents, and she comes to visit me every weekend she can. We spend hours talking about her photography projects, her classes, her dreams for the future. Yesterday, I finalized my new will. Everything I own, the house, the savings, all of it, will go to Drew when I'm gone. She's the only one who showed me real love, the only one who defended me even when she thought I couldn't hear her. She's the one who deserves it. You know, it's funny. Lucy spent years scheming to get her hands on my money, and all she had to do was be a decent human being. If she'd shown me just a fraction of the genuine love that Drew did, she would have inherited everything anyway. I may have lost a daughter, but I gained something more valuable, the truth. And in Drew, I found the kind of family I always wanted, one based on real love, not greed and deceit.